Right, we are at the top of the hour, so we will get started. This is our last session. We have been at the Big Splash all day, so we had a number of great sessions. We're excited to wrap things up with y'all from Zoom, and we wanted to make sure we were shining the light on a very critical tool in our digital learning environment, particularly as we shift into the fall semester. We have Tain, who's the product lead under the higher ed sector of Zoom, as well as Ryan Gallagher, who's the vertical marketing manager at Zoom. And Tain is new to his role, a couple weeks, couple months, if I recall. And we're also being joined by Ann Keen, who's the global education lead with Zoom. So it's fantastic to have this group who comes from the higher ed vertical of Zoom, who can share with us where we've been, where we're headed, and particularly as we continue to really use and innovate with Zoom, as we had a chance to speak a couple of weeks ago at the ASU event. So I will be moderating the session, and I have a couple of questions that I'll pepper in as we go. And then we will hear from you and just kind of make this a little bit of a dialogue at the end of the day. The session is being recorded, and we'll post a link to the recording on our YouTube channel in the coming days. And if you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and send your questions to academicinnovation@TAMU.EDU, or we're using Twitter with the hashtag TAMUBigSplash. And if we don't answer your questions, we'll get to them in the next couple of days. So with that, I think I'm turning things over to Tain, but I will welcome y'all to jump in, and excited to hear what you have to say.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to have us here today. It's great to be here with my colleagues, Ryan and Ann. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about where we're coming from a product standpoint. I'll talk a little bit and I'll toss it over to you, Ann. I know you have a few things that you want to talk about, specifically around shaping strategy as well. So if that works for you, I'm just going to go ahead and lead in a little bit. Yeah, Jocelyn, you're absolutely right. So I've been here a little bit over 7 weeks now, so it's still very fresh. It's been great to come in with completely fresh eyes. I've been in higher education my entire career, so it's been a really energizing and really refreshing change, and it's great to be able to be here to specifically work to shape Zoom for education. The first real tenet, the North Star that I've been looking at recently is engagement. I think that's a number one word that we're looking at, the number one concept. Right before I started, I read a great article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, and anybody who's spoken with me recently has probably heard me talk about this, but it really hit on where we've been recently. And it focused on this idea of emergency teaching versus true online education, right? Everybody has been thrust into an emergency teaching mode from K through 12 all the way up to higher education. Certainly at Zoom, we're honored that we were chosen as one of really the top platforms for that. But we also understand that now there needs to be a transformation going from that emergency mode to what is real online education? How do we actually learn? How do we interact? And how do we engage in this environment? And we can look at some graduate schools and some executive education programs and some of the more innovative programs that have been doing this for a while. They've been doing hybrid well, in a manner of speaking, but now we're expecting all schools to do this by the thousands with instructors who may not be trained on how to do this. Many of whom, especially in K through 12, are doing the prep work for free, and they're saying, what the heck do we do? And so our hope here is to at least help build the tools for that engagement, and to also help usher people through this process and really learn on this together. And I get it. I work for Zoom, and I get Zoom fatigue at meetings that are over 30 minutes, right? I think we all do. And I just think that really speaks to that engagement fact again. Video isn't just a one-way tool. We need to remove total focus from the teacher, from the front of the room, from the sort of stage on the stage, and really look at this idea of collaboration. So where that comes to, if we look a little bit at our roadmap, at least concepts that we want to work on, things like breakout rooms. It's an amazing place to split off from the class, get back together, collaborate with one's fellow students, and then come back out. That's how engagement happens, right? It breaks away from the traditional classroom, because it's very easy for sort of I'm in emergency teaching mode. I'm going to use Zoom. It's me in front of 40 of my best friends, and it's a very, very traditional model, right? We want to break from that. You know, along with that, this idea of custom configurations and classroom layouts. Can you drag people to where you want them? Who can you focus on? Can the instructor help focus the students on those particular individuals? These are all things that we need to think about as we move forward to help give instructors the tools to create this engagement in this kind of brave new world. You know, what do we do with chat channels, chat functions? How do we get people communicating and turning in assignments and really engaging with one another? Bigger questions beyond just the sort of new traditional type of education where it's video only. We need to think about audio. We need to think about things like the arts, dance, music, education. How can we improve that experience and that quality across the board? How can we improve this idea of better feedback for instructors? I've spoken to multiple schools and instructors who really lament the fact that they're not able to, quote, read the room anymore, right? They can't see if maybe a student is kind of lost or is raising their hand and they have something that's really urgent that they want to get across, right? How do we help foster that type of feedback? And then how do we look at things like assessment, testing, proctoring, right? The concepts themselves are radically changing, and we want to be able to move along with education to help help create that and do something new with it. And ultimately, we want to find ways not to just mimic the experience, but possibly find opportunities to actually improve upon the in-person experience. I know that's a really tall order, but I think it's a great North Star to look for. Anne, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. You know, there's a varying degree of expertise out there, even though we've been doing online learning for decades, right? And there's just so much quality as far as best practices goes. But for the most part, both in higher education and K-12 and corporate learning, and quite frankly, throughout it's a global issue, is that this whole idea of teaching in a synchronous manner all the time is something that's new for so many. And so having the capability to be able to use a tool like Zoom, and then the fact that Zoom is opening our APIs and our SDKs and our LTIs to allow others to build on top of our platform, so that is, especially in the education industry, really I think is going to do a couple of things. It's going to help improve student engagement. It's going to help improve faculty, the efficacy of teaching and learning, and just really build on a lot of the best practices. But the idea is to really make it, available to a spectrum of how faculty really want to use this type of a platform, if you will, in their own teaching and learning, whatever their curriculum, their courses, so it's a brand new sort of some are saying it's kind of a renaissance that's going on, even though it feels like it is a pandemic, but it's sort of a pandemic renaissance, as a conversation I was having with somebody yesterday. So it's we love collaborating, like Jocelyn, with leaders of academic innovation, and we love hearing from faculty. We love having the ability to be able to have these conversations so that we can improve together in a very collaborative way how we can help improve teaching and learning, especially to really help at the end game, of course, is to really help students achieve their academic goals.
Great. So y'all last week held your big K through 12 Academy. What can we learn in higher ed, and particularly what you saw last week? I mean, what can we learn from the K through 12 sector?
Interesting. We've been looking at the data, and Ryan, feel free to jump in here. We did a survey, and so there's a big survey. One, I think the fact that people want to hear from Zoom. They want to hear from each other. They want the ability to continue to collaborate. They want to improve their capability of using tools that they've never really had to use before, and now saying, you know what, maybe this is kind of an interesting way to just tweak, my course a bit, or even it's really opened up floodgates for some to say, there's a lot that I can do, and there's also a lot of people that I can reach that I haven't been able to reach before. So we've learned that there's this appetite to continue to learn, and to continue to collaborate, to continue to share. They want best practices. They want to invent best practices. They want to be able to, on a global basis, reach across and meet with other faculty that they haven't really been able to, or even experts, right? Bringing experts into the classroom that they just couldn't time and distance, you know. So there's this richness and reach capability that is out there, and I think there's just a great appetite for more of it in a digestible way.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, just looking at the results and everyone's like, it's so comforting to know that everyone's in the same boat. We're all trying to figure this out. Everything changed so rapidly, and it's nice to hear from people who, you know, are a little bit further along in their process, but know that there is that scale where, you know, even if you don't have everything figured out, it's okay. Like, we're all working through it. We're all in this community, and it's an amazing community that wants to share resources and try and continue to learn and adapt how they've been teaching. And so that's what I found was super inspiring by the K-12 Zoom Academy.
Yeah. And I would say also too, we got some really good feedback on not only things that we could do, like how we can improve the way that we teach and train on our products, right? And but also what are some of the education specific functionality that they would like to see, and you know, so we work Tain and I work very closely together, and so that kind of feedback was great too, and like Ryan said, it's like we're kind of all in this together, and it's this really great way of being able to experiment, test, and also start doing some, you know, efficacy testing and research around what, you know, where is this going, and I've already been approached by a couple institutes and research institutions like, you know, A&M, and to say, hey, you know, let's do some research around this, and let's make sure that we're bringing the best and the brightest together, and we're really studying this.
Yeah, so on that point, what are you hearing from other R1 institutions in terms of what is their wish list, and what can we look forward to as other R1 institutions are making the case? I mean, one of our big challenges specific to breakout rooms is our size. So we want to promote active learning in the digital learning environment, but there's some limitations with, say, breakout rooms, and how we figure that out in some of our larger classes. That's one particular example. So what do you hear from other R1 institutions of kind of the wants and wishes?
Yeah, well, definitely breakout rooms. And I think that's really the number one. I hear that from everywhere because it does relate right to that engagement concept. You know, a lot of things that are desired, and it's a lot of things we're looking at on our potential roadmap. You know, this idea of being able to allow students to enter breakout rooms on their own and sort of use the rule of 2 feet and move from breakout room to breakout room, sending files into breakout rooms, the potential of being able to see what's happening in breakout rooms, sharing into breakout rooms, having smaller breakout groups that can peel off where just the instructor and maybe 2 students can sort of have an aside and talk about a project or whatnot, and then come back to the main session. So we're seeing a lot of that. We've seen a lot of feedback about Zoom Rooms, actually, and the usability of Zoom Rooms, and sort of that parity between Zoom Rooms and the meeting client. And that's everything from being able to see that feedback on the screen when someone raises their hand, again, being able to read that room. We've had requests for augmentation in the number of screens that a Zoom room can support, the number of cameras that it can support, and even the potential of more robust backend scheduling for Zoom rooms. So it's a lot easier to actually control and administer them from one place. So those are really big ones. A lot in the area of LTI enhancements, just really being able to send information back and forth from the learning management system and the actual client. So that could be anything from launching a poll or an advanced quiz in Zoom and sending that back to Canvas and having those grades saved, and really just making that more of a seamless workflow, right? Making that new LTI integration happen. So those are some of the bigger ones. You know, being able to branch out a little bit, again, this idea of audio education, that's one that I found really interesting. It was one, I'll be perfectly honest, I hadn't considered when I came into the position, right? And it's kind of ironic. I came from teaching, from technology, from AV, but this idea of, here's a school that teaches music, they teach choir, they teach dance, and even though there's some teachers there for that, they're not getting that quality that they need. They're not able to do those remote piano sessions or stand-up bass or choir. And so it's looking at that and kind of those features that maybe in a traditional sense are sort of hidden, but really it makes perfect sense. We need to make sure that we're serving that as well. And then of course, accessibility, ensuring that ASL interpreters can always be seen, that can always be on the screen, and there are multiple options for that. So those are certainly some of the top ones. And it's a very long list. I think I have about 60 features that I think are 100% worth going on our roadmap, and it's determining, okay, what comes first, right? And so there's a lot of fantastic input out there, and I think a lot of different features that can really help sort of transform us into that platform.
Great. And in terms of accessibility, we just had a great session on accessibility in our previous session. What can we look forward to in terms of that functionality moving forward?
Yeah, so one that we're focusing on very strongly right now has to do with saving and reordering individuals in the gallery views. So being able to have your 25 grid or your 49 grid and being able to place individuals where you want them and have them stay in that place. So being able to add that predictability, as well as being able to pin or spotlight multiple individuals on the screen. So if I have a class of 40, I could grab a number of them, and then as a host, I could ensure that the rest of the class follows that view. So you could have those 2 interpreters, 3 panelists, and the meeting host or the instructor on the screen at all times, but also allowing the individuals in the audience to do that as well. So just to be able to create that type of persistence and that type of predictability, I think, is number one. We've had some other really fantastic requests come in for accessibility, specifically for deaf participants, with being able to flash to get the attention of individuals on the screen and help really enhance those visual cues.
So we had a question come in from our audience participants. What is Zoom working on to improve the usability of the collaborative whiteboard feature?
Yeah, so there are a lot of projects and there are a lot of ideas out there right now. Currently, we're working on accelerating the speed of the experience first. So really helping the horsepower, making it more responsive. Beyond that, we've had some great ideas and some great requests to really expand the number of whiteboards that are possible, potentially the ability for students to go back through the history of whiteboards in a class, bring them back up, review them. So imagine it's a business case class. You have an instructor who has sort of pre-filled whiteboards. And if this were a real classroom, they have an entire wall of just gigantic whiteboards, right? They'd be writing on them, they'd be sliding them. They could put some of the details from the case in them while they're running the class. They can virtually put them off to the side, but then the students could bring those back up and actually refer to them instead of just maybe saving them and putting them in the chat. So that type of behavior, that makes it more accessible for people to go back and actually see, while it's a synchronous experience, sort of bringing in that slightly asynchronous edge of being able to grab and review what's already been done. So there's some things that we're looking at right now.
So this question is, I would say, across the board to all 3 of y'all, because I'm sure you have different perspectives and experiences, and Tain and Ann are relatively new to Zoom, Ryan not as much. So how has your perception of the product shifted? I'm assuming, Ann and Tain, you were not with Zoom as we shifted remotely in March and early March. And now that you are with Zoom, how are you thinking differently about Zoom? And then this is also to Ryan, for you to talk a little bit about Zoomtopia. I've attended the last 2 years, and oftentimes there's some translation of the product to higher ed, or that's been the case in the past. And so I think now more than ever, y'all speak directly to us, which is so helpful to someone in a position like mine. And we can iterate off the resources that you provide and, you know, the ideas that you share with us. So just wondering a little bit about your thoughts on how Zoom has evolved, how Zoom's pushed higher ed. And then Ryan, if you want to speak to some of the kind of how Zoomtopia is being reconceived to really envelop higher ed in probably a ways it never has in the past.
Right. Really good question. So Zoom, its origins has always been a very strong partner with higher education. And so some of our early customers and big supporters have been in higher education. So really help shape and disseminate Zoom and in sort of an organic way and then and in a more formal way. But with the pandemic and our CEO Eric Yuan's decision to take the 40-minute limit off of the basic free license for K-12 has just really was you know, in a very genuinely heartfelt and response by our CEO for what the world was going through and to make sure that education would be accessible. So education is a core value and it's a big emphasis in the company. And so it's, you know, we were overwhelmed, no doubt, and we're still feeling that, and we're growing like crazy. But what they realize is that education is an incredibly important vertical. So that's why you see Tain coming in as the global education product lead, and I'm the global education lead. And so we're building out the capacity, and we're giving Ryan a lot more support than he ever got before. And I just wish I could clone Ryan 10 times over. So any faculty out there into cloning, let me know. So, but it's you know, we're making a significant investment all across the board in every capacity of the company, and it's not just about licenses. It is about adoption and really improving the teaching and learning experience, and that is number one. How can we really help the world, both formal and informal, learn from each other, connect with each other, and we see learning as you know, now the term is it's more cradle to forever. And, you know, we're that 6-year curriculum or more, right? It's like learning is across the board, which keeps us human, I think, is the fact that we always learn. So this emphasis and investment and is definitely by design. So Ryan, do you want to talk about Zoomtopia?
Yeah. So I think that just over the last, you know, year, I mean, the growth in education has just been so rapid, and it's been incredible to see this team expand and have that much deeper focus, and just all the innovation that has come and that will come, and just seeing what all of like the customers are doing with the product and pushing the envelope, and, you know, having such innovative use cases and coming to us with ideas and, oh, let's work on this together, and just that collaboration. And so with that, it's allowed for us to keep expanding our Zoomtopia presence with education, where, you know, we're at least doubling the amount of sessions that we had from last year when it comes to education, specifically for higher education as well. And just really having deep dives into what does the future of education really look like, and how do we continue to innovate, and how do we sustain this model of, like, the education is really transformed in this last year, and it's probably not going to go back to how it was before. And so how do we keep improving on this idea and make it a better experience, and continue with that global reach as well, where now you have access to so many more resources around the world, and you don't have to just go into one location and be just in that one environment. Now you have access to just an entire world and everything that brings. So that's what I'm very excited about. I think Zoomtopia being virtual this year, it's free. It's October 14th and 15th. it's just going to allow for so many more people to go and participate instead of having to come to San Jose for our 2-day event. Like now you can participate anywhere and anytime. And so that's what I'm really excited about.
Great. Any more to add to that, Tain?
Yeah, just from the perception point of view, it's really interesting. So when I started at the Stanford Medical School in June 2016, my first big project was actually working with Central University IT to determine what our next big cloud video conferencing provider was going to be. They were moving away from one provider, and we're looking across the entire landscape. And it's interesting because that's where my relationship and just knowledge of Zoom started. And I knew there was something really interesting there just because of the groundswell. I was reaching out to some individuals and getting a few free licenses to try it out. And after a week, people around the university would say, hey, Tain, can you get me another license? Hey, can you get us some licenses? And every week I'd be reaching out to our Zoom rep and saying, can I get another 50? I think we need another 100. Yeah. And it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And, and we did an incredibly comprehensive study, and the university chose Zoom. And so number one, there was an energy that I thought was great. And then we were, just general users of Zoom for quite some time. And then boom, the pandemic hit, right? And, I was able to really see what was possible with it, because until that time, we had general users. Yes, people were, creating a culture of more online collaboration. And, we're in the Bay Area. We're trying to keep people from having to commute as much. But then everything really, really hit, and I saw how it really kind of kept a lot of the threads of our society together. And that might sound a little bit dramatic, but I really think it's true. I think it's incredibly important. And, I'm in a space right now where, and I just lost my train of thought, a door just opened behind me. Excuse me. Hold on, I'm sorry. All right. Working from home, it changes everything. What really struck me was this. I have worked in education for 15 years, and I had told myself, I don't think I would ever go into industry, because working in education is where I want to be. I feel like it can make an impact in as many lives as possible. And this opportunity arose, and after seeing what could happen with education, seeing what happened at the university and how it connects people, it actually made sense to make that leap. And so that was an incredibly positive change, and it was the right thing to do. And I really do feel that we are here working to make something really positive happen, and we can have a lot of impact. And I think it's great to be on board with that. And I hope we can all do our parts to make that continue.
So what do you need, speaking to Ryan's point about the future of education, what do you need from an institution like Texas A&M University, where we in fall of 2019 had the largest enrolled student body in the country? And we've heard today from leadership at both Arizona State University and University of Central Florida, who are among our peers in terms of our size. So what do you need from us in terms of making sure that we're going to be able to sustain and be resilient to what comes at us over the next couple months, the next year, whatever this future looks like that Ryan spoke to?
I want to answer that in a way that, I've been working with colleges and universities for over 30 years, and I held a position as a senior fellow for technology and innovation at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I was looking at digital transformation, like even 10 years ago, and thinking about if we are going to start adopting digital technologies, teaching and learning tools, and digital content, then we need to think about different ways of supporting faculty and students in a digital world. And I think that has become quite clear through the pandemic that we need to have more people like yourself, Jocelyn, who are in and leading centers for academic innovation and centers for teaching and learning, and just creating that capability around learning science and instructional design and support. I think we need to give faculty and students support and room, and there's all sorts of allowances that need to be made for experimentation and for time to be able to work on course redesign, and it doesn't always have to be, right now it's like either you do everything totally outside or you do it, all internally. But there's a lot of different, I think, ways of being able to support faculty. And I think that's something that every institution needs to take a look at, is how do we do that? And it's faculty and students in this sort of new digital world that we're in.
And I have one last question for y'all, and this is something that I'm very passionate about in my prior role in terms of research. How are you thinking about the digital divide as a company, and how will you address that? I know you've talked some about your global footprint. We have these issues at Texas A&M, very locally as well. So what are your thoughts? What are your strategy? Because the product is only so good if the product works. And that's something that I think we will all grapple with and struggle with, and need to be really innovative over the next couple of months, and come up with solutions as we go, and showcase them and bring them to you all. So what are you thinking about, and what are you seeing?
Right. So there's Zoom as a company is being approached by a lot of organizations. Even like yesterday, I had a conversation with the Boys and Girls Clubs, and they serve over 2 million children in rural areas and in inner city areas who don't necessarily have a place to go after school, weekends, and so. And a lot of these children are being, disproportionately affected by the ability to have access to a device or even broadband, internet. And so we are looking and working with, some of the major providers, and just talking and really paying attention to this, because it's important to the fabric of who we are as a society, to be able to really think about how can we have, access equality and help. We hired a chief diversity and equity officer, and Damian Hooper Campbell, and we're really talking a lot about how can Zoom help. We're always going to have our basic license is going to be free, though that 40-minute lift, may not always be there, but for now it is. At least till the end of the year. But how can we also help enable the people that are working very strongly with thinking about the digital divide, and where is it device? Is it like broadband? Like I said, what is it training? Is it, what kind of support? So it's important. It's top of mind for sure. And we'll look to the research universities and to help us, guide us, and think about how can we collectively as a society work to make sure that access to quality education is available.
Sure. I think that's a role we'll all play in the coming weeks and months. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. It's great to hear your perspective, where we're headed, where we've been, and then especially to Anne and Tain, who are relatively new to Zoom and have been able to look kind of from the outside, and now very much embedded in where we're headed. And it's been so wonderful to work with Ryan over the last year. For those of you listening in via the live stream, we have Matt Supich, who is our customer success manager with Zoom, and he will be with us next Friday at noon Central, going through a little bit of our data, our stats, where we've been as an institution with Zoom, and where we can go, particularly through some of the product development that Tain referenced. So that will be an exciting session. I hope y'all will be able to join. And then just a quick plug for tomorrow's session. We've got LinkedIn Learning at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central, who will talk about product implementation and how we can maximize the product, both in terms of course content as well as for professional development, professional and personal development. So there'll be a nice segment on how to use LinkedIn Learning as we all work from home and live from home in a lot of ways. And then we will also have our instructional designer from Canvas, who's developed our template that was deployed in about 20,000 course shells on July 15th. And she'll take us through that template and how to use it. And if you're struggling, she'll be there with questions. And those sessions will be moderated by two individuals from the Faculty Senate, Dr. Jasperson and Dr. Klein, who who will be promoting the use of the minimum syllabus requirements that are also embedded in the template. So definitely don't want to miss that session either. 2 opportunities to join in, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Central. And then of course, for those of you all signed up for the 3-hour Canvas training, that should be fantastic. 2 sessions tomorrow, 9 a.m. for 3 hours, and then 1 p.m. for 3 hours. And again, registration is required for the Canvas training. So thank you so much to our friends and partners from Zoom. And thank you all for participating all day. It's been a really great opportunity, and all of these sessions will be available, recorded at a future date. So
I would be remiss in not saying that my sister and her whole family are Aggies. If I didn't say that, she would be really upset with me. So we have a family of Aggies, so gig 'em Aggies, right?
Thank you, Anne. It's great to work with y'all, and we will sign off for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.